Hey, White Sox fans, it's Brett Valentini here, hosting the Southside Sox podcast. It's number 29, believe it or not. And we're going back to back 28 and 29 with a little bit of Camelback Confidential. We are talking with Sean Williams, who is a photographer for Southside Sox and SB Nation. He just covered his second game at Camelback Ranch yesterday's win. So welcome, Sean. We're going to get right into that game, but welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Happy to be out there shooting some pictures and happy to see another win. They're 2-0 in games that I'm taking pictures at. So I might have to just go to every single game at this point.
We made that joke prematurely last week, but now I think it's starting to get serious. Now, it's not to say that SB Nation Southside Sox doesn't pay you handsomely, but I'm hoping you managed to pull some Sox hat swag yesterday, which is what you're wearing now, or is that just the gear that was sitting around the house?
It's actually one that's been sitting around the house for a few years here. Hair was a little messy this morning when I woke up, so I didn't feel like having all of our watchers see that. So, just threw a cap on it and got ready to go.
I don't know if it's changed, but press row, even visiting media, and I think certainly home media at Sox Park, I think in most cases, get the giveaways. So if only this winning streak can continue to make it a clean 3-0 for Camelback, and then somehow, you're flown up for coverage in Chicago. All right, that swag situation might actually be legit. But all right, so that wasn't just a stray tumbleweed ball cap, and actually something fitted and legit for you. All right, just was hoping for you. All right, well, let's talk about, I guess, if there's anything of note about your day actually shooting, if there's something different from day 1 or 2. I think you mentioned to me before we went on that the conditions were at least a little bit better for shooting.
Yeah, it was significantly different than day 1. Day 1 was pretty much all overcast, and it was actually kind of cold. It was like 50 degrees for most of the day. Yesterday was 84 and sunny for the most part. So in terms of getting pictures of people, that's what you want. So it was pretty much ideal shooting conditions. And, like we talked about a little bit last time, it's not that crowded there. So just being able to get around and move around, which I did more this time, just kind of hopped around to a couple different locations there. It was good. Got a lot of pictures and almost through all of them, but I'm really happy with everything that I got yesterday. So it was a really good day.
The first run was sweet in 50 degrees in whatever ridiculous underdressed, overdressed conditions. So when you're in ideal conditions for life, by the way, not just for a baseball game. I imagine the product from yesterday is going to be even better. And again, a win. I guess let's spill into that. Another win. You are clearly the lucky charm for the team, but this last week has also provided a nice little boost of wins. Apparently, the team and Tony are taking it all more seriously or something. And we're starting to see some actual win production, but let's step through the game yesterday a little bit. Pretty much jumped on Cleveland early. And I know they were running a little bit more of a B team out there. So they did what they should have done, but there were some interesting highlights in the game.
Yeah, it seems like pretty much everyone that was in the lineup contributed. Everyone was kind of clicking except for like Luis Robert. I think he went hitless. He actually had a couple of really rough plate appearances, but that'll happen. It's just growing pains with a young player. But everyone looked good. Grandal was hitting the ball hard. Zach Collins was hitting the ball hard. I know he got buried in like an 0-2 count earlier in the game, and then he took a deep fly out, which is good to see for him, for a guy that has a lot of swings and misses. So that was exciting, but it seemed like the offense was just clicking yesterday. I know they scored 6 runs with all of them being in the first 2 innings, but even throughout the game, their outs were loud outs and they were hitting the ball hard all day. So that was pretty exciting to see. And yeah, kind of like you said, it was like a B team for Cleveland, but they did have a couple major league arms on the mound too. So it was impressive to see them kind of beat them up all day and obviously get the win.
And it's telling about a dynamic talent like Luis Robert that he is, and really through the spring has scuffled at the plate. But the one time he is able to get on base, he creates such incredible havoc with the double steal and then scoring on a play that not many human beings would be able to score on. Practically running down the average or maybe slightly slower than average runner in front of him, creating sort of a hilarious scene there at home plate where he's just like, he probably even had to let up a touch just to not run into the runner in front of him. It's a really extraordinary display.
That play in particular too, you could literally, you could see it. I don't know. They probably didn't show him the whole time on the TV yesterday, but as soon as he saw he had a window there, he was like, I'm scoring. Like he was just thinking that the whole time.
And Super Joe picked up on that right away because he was waving him. It wasn't like he was like, oh, what's going on? I mean, he was waving him before he's even in frame. So, and again, Super Joe last year was a guy who never hesitated to tout the extraordinary raw talent and actual baseball playing talent of Luis Robert. So, I mean, I think he's a guy I think he knows when Luis is on first, definitely on second, and even on first, he can get the arm ready because he didn't hesitate. And I mean, that's not exactly a common play to be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to send the guy who just stole second because the ball got away. So that was a fun little highlight, and it does speak to a guy who can still contribute even when maybe he's not getting the bat on the ball the way he has been struggling for a lot of the spring. I guess before we hit our break, let's continue talking and I guess discuss first and foremost maybe the biggest piece of news that wasn't good to come out of the game, and that was Adam Engel coming up sort of strangely lame on a ball. I guess he was sort of laying out a little bit for just to get to a sacrifice fly, and apparently had a little tweak and twinge in the hamstring, left the game on his own power. He's sort of a badass anyway, so he's going to do everything he can to not look like anything affects him. Of course, the fact that he had to leave the game, he's going to be further evaluated today here when we're recording. We're not really aware of what the diagnosis is as we're talking now. Has led a lot of speculation, a lot of panic, I guess, in the fan base that this means he's going to be out for a ton, and oh no, leads to a lot of criticism even in the fan base. So tell me what you saw and your thoughts about maybe what happens in the outfield based on maybe even a minor injury to Adam.
Yeah, so it just looked like one of those kind of, I guess I'll say, like freak plays where he came in on a ball and he popped up to throw and he did a little tumble after he threw, and then he was just kind of there on the ground. It happened like right recently after he was put in the game. I think he got like one at bat beforehand, but it'll be interesting to obviously see what the extent of the injury is, how long he's going to be out for. And they have a couple options. Granted, they're not great, but they do have a couple options. They got Billy Hamilton on the team now. He could be an easy guy to plug in and play there. Obviously he brings speed similar to Engel. Engel does a lot of stuff better than him, but you got that factor that Billy Hamilton brings where he can be a threat on the base pass, and in the field he'll be fine too. And then they have Leury García. He has outfield experience, so if you want to use him as a backup outfielder, but then that kind of creates a little more questions as to who's going to be that utility guy that fills in for what Leury was supposed to do. So I guess it just kind of depends how they want to look at it. I would probably just go with Billy Hamilton because it's just an easy replacement, but that's just me.
And I wonder if it comes down to La Russa obviously has a pretty strong stamp on the team, had a strong enough stamp to get hired in the first place. And what does he prefer? Does he prefer the speedster type of guy like Hamilton, which you would argue is perhaps the case because he's in camp in the first place? I mean, he was cut loose by Cleveland. There was no obvious reason to pick him up unless it caught the attention of the manager, or a Danny Mendick, who I think is very much on the bubble for the team, and is the versatility and youth. Probably can do more things, but not any one thing or two things better than Billy Hamilton. Obviously, bunting, speed, base stealing. Maybe that's what it comes down to. We shouldn't just look at it as strictly an outfield situation, because if it's a matter of Engel being out for a little time, or just let's say being slow, not to overreact to the injury, because he is going to at least have 10 days to ramp up for opening day, even if he needs the reps to sort of be ready for opening day or soon after. That a guy like maybe then Leury can cover, maybe for that first series, let's say, or that first road trip where you're not going to feel too compromised. Obviously, you want as much flexibility as possible, but And then, then you take into account maybe whether or not there's possibly going to be a third catcher in the mix. I mean, the bench is still very much in question in your mind, or you think it's settled?
I think it's still in question, and that was obviously before this injury, and now with this. Granted, he could be okay, and it might not be much of an issue. It didn't seem like it, back then, or I shouldn't say back then, yesterday. But this just kind of adds another question mark to something that wasn't even really settled before. So it'll be really interesting now to kind of see, obviously first what the news is on Engel, and then second, assuming that he's going to miss some time, what they're going to do now, because now they got to, fill a couple spots.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially when I saw the signing or the pickup of Billy Hamilton, that was like, okay, what is this telling Adam Engel, and what's the message delivered here? And I suppose that's still got to be an element. But I suppose the worst news is for a guy like Nick Williams, who has the possibility, given an injury like this, of being that fourth, or I don't know, maybe fifth outfielder, making the club. But it seems like there's under little circumstance would you imagine LaRussa, who along with the rest of the team, I imagine with the backing of the front office, says, hey, this is win now mode. We are not running up there with rookies who are still somewhat up for question. It's not like Nick Williams has set the camp on fire. I think he's impressed. I think he has capability to man either corner well. I think it actually, given the nature of the activity for right field, for bolstering right field this year, probably Rick Hahn's best move looking right now, even though everybody seems fairly pleased with what Adam Eaton's done so far at the cost. But I'd say it's bad news. I mean, now that the dust settles, it's really bad news more for anybody young who's hoping to make a run at this team. And I guess Nick Williams is probably primary in that. I don't know if you scratch him off the list entirely, but it seems like a guy like Billy Hamilton, who is probably also susceptible to injury and leg injury, as well, given he's a little bit older now, even though he hasn't really seemed to have lost a step yet. So it's probably bad news for any young guy, and Nick Williams is probably definitely ticketed to Schaumburg at this point. Huh?
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. And it's just kind of like, injuries happen during the baseball season. It just is what it is. It's a long season. It's a grind. And for a team like the White Sox, you brought up a good point with how they're like win now mode. And, it's just like, do they really want to mess around and, kind of just put someone like Nick Williams in there? Can they afford to do that? Probably not. And it's unfortunate for Nick, who has been doing good this spring. And even, before Engel went down, he really didn't have much of a path to the roster. This maybe opened up a slight chance, but it's a very, very, very slight chance. And I'd be shocked if he got an opportunity.
Now, the reassuring news for a guy like Nick Williams is that he was probably told when signed, your best case scenario to the roster is showing well in spring training, then going to Charlotte, or what is now going to be Schaumburg, at least for the first month, and just kick ass there. And then perhaps if you're really showing that you're getting some great at bats under you, then maybe you are the first call up if there's an outfield need. On the other hand, Zach Collins has been lighting it up, and he's a guy who is still somewhat behind the eight ball. He might be the clear number two. We're unsure. With Jonathan LaCroix in the mix, again, sort of playing that Billy Hamilton factor. He's a guy who's proven to be able to handle pitchers. He's a veteran who's going to show leadership that Zach Collins can't. And again, from a Tony La Russa standpoint, a guy like Jonathan LaCroix might have to play his way out of that number two role. Is Zach going to see a similar fate to a Nick Williams? Is there a path at all? I think we addressed this last time we talked as well, but is there a path at all to three catchers, given that Zach he's a lefty bat that helps him. He can play a little first. Obviously, he can DH. Mm-hmm. Or is he a guy who is going to maybe see the same fate, where it's like, well, if LaCroix gets hurt, or if something happens to Grandal, I'm the guy who's coming up. But I mean, he's gone. That was his situation last year. So how do you think it might be different for Zach?
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that there's a path for three catchers on the roster, just because it's not really necessary. So for Zach, it seems like he's kind of in that similar path to Nick Williams, where it's just tough for him and tough for him to get a spot with everything going on. But I've been kind of thinking, LaCroix's got it. LaCroix's got it. He's that veteran, that, guy that's been around. But it's like Zach Collins just keeps hitting, and he hasn't slowed down this spring. Granted, spring training stats aren't everything to write home about. But for a guy like Zach that's fighting for a roster spot, he's making, defensive updates, and he's hitting the ball extremely well. Swings and misses haven't been, as drastic as they have been for him in the past. It's like, spring training is all about position battles and fighting for roster spots for these guys. And Zach Collins is literally, I think, fought to the best of his ability. So does he deserve the spot? Yeah, absolutely. I think he does. But will he actually get it? I don't think so. But he's been awesome, and you got to give him a lot of credit for everything he's put together this spring.
All right, we are going to seg into a pitching discussion. We're going to take a short detour also to talk front office a bit, but we're going to take a break now. If you listen to the podcast, you're probably going to hear a couple ads. If you are watching us on the YouTube channel, just take a moment. Imagine the swag that Sean Williams may get on his third game covering and shooting photos for us for SB Nation. Take a second, and we'll be right back. Hey there, White Sox fans. We are back with Southside Sox Podcast number 29. We're doing another Camelback Confidential with Sean Williams. We talked about yesterday's win and the fact that the team has turned around a little bit and starting to put some wins up in that left-hand column. And before we get into a discussion of some of the still open issues with the pitching staff, let's address the fact, and I think we can look at how the pitching staff is shaping up and look at it as sort of a mixed mark, because the bullpen is solid as can be. The rotation, well, we're going to get to that. But this situation we were just discussing before the break with right field does point to the fact that not a lot was done in the offseason by the White Sox, and the moves made, at least particularly in the outfield, are certainly up for question. Obviously, the Adam Eaton acquisition has been done to death, but it would be nice if we were discussing Adam Eaton's role increasing and maybe getting thrust into the starting lineup as a guy who came in perhaps as your fourth, paid as a fourth, when talking about an injury to a legit, real right fielder. No diss on Adam Engel, but he wasn't going into this season as the 150 game start right fielder under any circumstances anyhow. And does this injury, expose the fact that, in a sense, as the contention window is thrown open for the White Sox, that the Sox punted some decisions this offseason or even in off seasons prior?
Yeah, I would think punted is a good way to describe it. So I'll agree with you there. It just seems like there were a lot of good options, better than what they had available or what they have now, that were sitting out there for them. And it just seems like they kind of, I don't want to say panicked, but maybe just settled and kind of struck early with right field, which surprised me a little bit. Because that was one of the biggest holes on the roster. They tried the Nomar Mazar experience, and that was horrible. So it was like, okay, we really don't have, any in-house options right now for a full-time starter. So I thought they'd kind of swing big with right field. So I was a little surprised that they didn't, but if I had to guess, they probably just went with the familiarity route. They've had Adam Eaton before. He's been around some of the guys in the clubhouse.
He made such an impact.
So they were just like, hey, let's bring this guy back. Maybe he's changed a little bit, and he's got that World Series experience now. That's kind of what we need, and he's got a little edge to him, which I will say is good. The Sox could use that. So,
Sean, if that's the reason, I'm getting more agitated about this decision now, not less.
That's what I'm here for.
What's fascinating to me, and it was only, I think there's only been one, I think it was that controversial, I guess, de facto Q&A, I think Han did with The Athletic, which was overshadowed by the fact that he was criticizing the fan base again. But, another thing that was inserted in there in the piece was justification for having jumped, what we're speculating on now, justification for having jumped, and that the option was, hey, listen, we knew our guy, so we were just going to get him. And it just, I don't think, I mean, maybe it was left on the cutting room floor. There was no information provided in the piece as to how Adam Eaton becomes the guy on the first day of the winter meetings. You throw a considerable amount of money at to secure that he's clearly your guy. One obvious thing is that he bats left-handed, but
yeah,
he wasn't the only guy who did that. And Adam Eaton's the guy you talk about now. Oh man, Adam Engel got hurt. Oh man, we better bring in Eaton. He's still out there, right? Yeah, okay, he's out there. Oh man, this will be great. This is really fortunate that he's still out there, and he can be a guy who can step in and fill. He's not the guy who started spring training in your platoon for that money. I mean, it is. I'm sorry. I don't want to seem like it's nitpicking. I certainly don't want to keep beating this, but the idea that you're in this contention window and that this one injury now triggers a situation where Billy Hamilton off the scrap heap is now perhaps starting games for you. Nick Williams, your best guy now is probably your number one guy. Blake Rutherford already optioned. Your best guy as, whatever your 4A, your AAA guy coming up. I'm not sure what the White Sox are waiting for. I don't know if this is a Santa Claus situation where Mike Rodolfo was supposed to have an incredible spring, so now he played himself into possibly a roster spot. I know we've got Yoki Cespedes in the wings, but that wings could be years from now, no matter how much you want to talk up how quickly this guy's going to come and what is he going to do once he does come. It hurts because, the team made the playoffs perhaps prematurely in 2020, but let's also remember it was a weird lotto ball situation, which is how they got into the playoffs. Let's not pretend that this was legit playoffs. Sorry, again, I'm not trying to act like the milk was sour, but it is the truth with how they played in the last week. So this is sort of an asterisk playoff team in the first place. This window of contention's open, and now we're discussing how Billy Hamilton might play a significant role in the opening day lineup or bench, and it's disappointing. I'm sorry. We are told, okay, we had to wait through 100 lost seasons. We had to wait through basically a decade that was a debacle for a time now where we can enjoy some of the spoils of what have been some extremely deft moves by the front office and using their legit player currency to bring in future players who have now become factors on this team. Credit due, but you got to put it all together. And right now, there's reason. It's nitpicking. Clearly it's nitpicking, but this is a podcast. We nitpick. It's worrying. And, it is sort of unfortunate that these are the options we're discussing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. You would have liked to see him pounce and swing a little bit more for the fences for something like right field. The lineup is stacked even with Adam Eaton in there, but he would have liked to see it be a little more stacked. He's left-handed, so he'll bring some balance, which is always nice, but like we kind of said, and we've probably said it a couple times throughout here, there are better options out there. Even someone like Jock Peterson, he would have been I think he ended up signing for a very similar price. He's younger too, maybe. What's that? Even less.
Even
okay.
less.
Yeah. And I know they did talk to him and they offered him a contract. And at the time he said no, and it came back to bite him. But it's like, what's the big, give him a couple extra, or not thousand, give him a couple extra $1 million. It's not our money, so they can do it. But it's unfortunate. You would have liked to see him, pounce and kind of raise the bar in right field a little more.
And listen, we've been told, hey, we made the best offer on Zach Wheeler, or whether the White Sox front office said that or not, it seems like sources say it was the best offer on Zach Wheeler. Clearly they really pushed the envelope with Manny Machado to the point where they thought he was in the bag, and whoops, look what happened. He got stolen away, and the White Sox did not adjust, or they said no. I think they said no, we're not going further, even though at the same time claiming they had the best offer. We didn't hear that about Bryce Harper. And Bryce Harper was a guy who they did throw out the pomp and circumstance for. They dressed up the United Center. They clearly were whining and dining, though apparently not as seriously as Machado. And maybe early on in the process, Harper said, no, I want to play East. I dream of playing for the Yankees, or I want to go West Coast. I mean, maybe he did say something. Comments subsequently have not indicated that, but I want to know that they pushed it on an offer there too. And yes, if that means that Blake Rutherford becomes, trade fodder, or Mike Rodolfo never sees the major leagues. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing because we have Bryce Harper in right field. And,
Yeah.
the payroll hasn't taken a hit. I was looking at an article from the fall that was projecting payrolls. I want to say that the Fangraphs was projecting the White Sox at like 140 million. I mean, the idea that we don't just spend just to spend, and that's what a lot of people are patting themselves on the back about Liam Hendricks about. It's like, well, at least we spent money. It's like, I'm no genius, so I'll just get off of this. This is a far longer segment than I anticipated it to be, but it's frustrating to be this close, to be on the cusp of the playoffs, and now still having to be debating whether we can get to 90 wins.
It's just like you really don't have that many missing pieces at this point. Like, why not just really spend, and just, even if you overspend a little bit, just go get that missing piece, or that person that can be a huge difference maker. Like, what? Just do it. That's it.
I do just want to get the Rick Hahn quote at some point. Maybe it's 10 years from now. I want to get the quote. I want the paragraph that says, "This is why I had to jump for Adam Engel." And listen, it may be completely plausible, and I'm totally whiffing on it. Maybe he'll call me and say, "Brett, not for publication, but this is the reason, you idiot." And I'll be like, "Oh my God." And I'll never speak of it again. I'll just smile and nod politely when the subject of Adam Eaton comes on, because I'll know the reason why, because I don't think there's a reason why. Anyway, let's get to the pitching, a situation that in some ways is a lot more settled, but then on the other hand, all right, let's not spill into the criticism of the offseason again, but all right, let's start with rotation. I guess there's a little bit more holes. And I think when we spoke a week ago, things seemed a lot more settled than they are now. Dylan Cease just had a start yesterday with that is one of those that it's like, well, on paper, it was like, pretty good, and didn't get scored on. But in reality, it was rough. In reality, it calls into question some of the whole Ethan Katz, miracle worker talk. And again, obviously, I'm scrutinizing 2 spring starts, so I'll dial it back and shut up. But clearly, there's not a run here that even we saw with Carlos Rodón. 2 strong starts, and looks like he's just off to the races. Again, spring is time for have those steps back. Everybody's buried Reynaldo Lopez. He has had a couple rough outings, but there shouldn't be any dirt on him either. We're talking about 3 guys for 2 spots on the rotation, and nothing is necessarily settled, because even with Carlos Rodón, if you say settled, you realize that he's averaged, I believe, 14 starts per year in his career. So it's always you got to hold your breath with that. You cross your fingers that he can even become your 4, but you hold your breath with that. How are you sizing up how the rotation is playing out, and how much hope do you have for 40% of the rotation going into this season?
So we obviously know 1 through 3 is settled, right? That's set in stone. 4, I think it'll be Dylan Cease will be locked into the 4 spot. He's got really good stuff. Obviously, command's been an issue. He struggles with throwing strikes. And I know I shouldn't say I know, acting like I personally know, but I've heard that Ethan Katz really likes Dylan Cease too. And he's been working with him, for a while. So he'll probably get the little nod over someone like Rodón or Lopez and slide into that 4th spot. So I think that's his. In terms of 5, I think it's going to be Carlos Rodón. I've kind of always been on that train pretty much since they brought him back. I always thought it was going to be his spot. And he started getting he got to start this spring, and he looked awesome. I mean, he's looked awesome this entire spring. So that's been exciting and good for him. But in terms of how I feel about it, not great, I guess. I'm not like, I'm usually the optimistic guy. But I'm not feeling like down and like upset about it. It's just, I guess, like uneasy would be a good way to describe it, to where it's like, if Katz is the miracle worker and he unlocks Cease, then that's a whole different story. And that rotation 1 through 4 is fantastic. The book's still out on him. We still, it hasn't been great for his major league career so far, but if he can figure out how to throw strikes and do it consistently, then we're looking at a really good rotation. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. I get to be determined, I guess, but as of right now, I don't feel like particularly great about it, but I'm also not like beating myself up. Oh my God, this rotation, what the heck?
You get a sense that on a more than weekly basis that Rick Hahn is sitting in the office, I'm sure with sports radio or White Sox Twitter just blaring alongside and like balancing the checkbook. Even in this contention window, I get this feeling it's like, we can make an argument that says, okay, why in the world, even though it could all work out, and knock on wood, it's going to, and Carlos Rodón is going to be like the most kick-ass fifth starter in the league. I mean, it's entirely plausible. And Cease solves things, and he's going to have a starter. Might still be sloppy. He might still be good for just 5 innings, but they might be scoreless 5. It could work out that way. That's best case scenario. It's not going to be better than that. And we've got Lance Lynn laboring through to get through 4 innings, in a mid-spring start. I mean, it's great he's ramped up and he showed he's got his stamina. And I mean, of course, we're just skipping over Dallas Keuchel and the fact that he sort of passed on his first start here in mid-March. But anyway, assuming 1 through 3 is fine, and I think we can assume that. Got 40% of the rotation up for question. And what else is there? This is not a rotation that's ready to definitively make a run. And you get the feeling it's like, well, okay, we're going to talk about the bullpen in a second, where there's like no spots in the first place because it's so good. The clear strength of this team, great. But this rotation, who's he? I mean, we don't even have like the Irvin. I mean, I understand it's a joke to say like, oh, we get Irvin Santana or whatever, some guy who's over the hill or whatever, just as our insurance or whatever. Last year we grabbed a Clayton Richard, for Schaumburg, as I guess a just in case situation, which makes sense. And there may be still a guy there pitching at Charlotte, but we don't already have that guy secured. That's like, oh wait, there's 6 arms for 5 spots. Well, okay, you're supposed to have 6 arms for 5 spots. And if it means the guy has to get cut loose because he didn't make the team, he's a veteran, he's like, okay, I have a right to, opt out. Okay, but at least you got the guy on the list. So, I mean, we haven't had injury issues, yet. We've had effectiveness questions for everybody but Lucas Giolito. This just doesn't seem to be, this seems like we're still crawling. We're like trying to sneak in. We're not equipped in the way we should. Again, bullpen notwithstanding, that's going to be a fun discussion to have here in a minute, but it's frustrating to know that this team is so ready, and when it's clicking, there's nobody better. It's clicking, they might be the best team in baseball. They proved that even for a short stretch. Well, it was actually a decent extended stretch in 2020. The idea that one thing, be it ineffectiveness or injury, can just trigger a landslide that keeps the White Sox out of the playoffs, pushes them a lot closer to 500 than we want to acknowledge, is frustrating. And it does make things uneasy. And it does sound like, it makes you seem like such a negative Nancy, but we have to evaluate this team 1 to 26. And when you're getting closer to playoffs, that 20 to 26 is crucial. And right now the 20 to 26 is, well, we hope, hey, look, Billy Hamilton, let's make him one of the 26. That's not a playoff team. That's not a division favorite.
Yeah. And the arms thing is a good point. Just having kind of that extra security. There's going to be roster cuts coming up in spring training. And, obviously a team like the White Sox who are on the rise and people are going to want to play for them. At least you would think so. They might have a chance to get, some decent kind of depth arm that they can keep in Schaumburg or the alternate site for now, and then have them just pitch in Charlotte and just be like, hey, listen, one thing happens. Someone misses a starter, someone has to miss a couple of starts. You're going to be our guy. You're going to be coming up. You're going to be filling in here for us. So I think, they still could add something like that, but for now, you're right. They don't have depth like that. They got some of their prospect arms in Charlotte, but you don't necessarily want to have to rush guys to the major leagues or, just throw a potential question mark in there for a team that has playoff aspirations. You can just go add, one of those veteran guys for cheap that, hey, they might not light the world on fire, but they can at least give us, a handful of decent innings. And that's kind of what we need here. So time will tell. They still have a chance to get some of that, but I agree with you. You would like to see a little bit more depth, especially around, the starters and stuff like that. They do have guys like Michael Kopech, but we know he's a bullpen guy, and coming off Tommy John and coming off opting out, you don't want to throw him and make him, run his arm into the ground again. And Garrett Crochet, they drafted him as a starter, but he's got time before he's going to be even stretched out to do that. So
Yeah, they're like half pitchers this year. I think it seems like innings limit would have them being like half guys. So you could run one full tilt for the first half and run one full tilt for the second half, but that's not how they're going to approach it.
Yeah. And for a guy like Michael Kopech too, you want to have him available for the playoffs, and you don't want to, be like, oh my gosh, we had an injury here. Let's go start Michael Kopech and have him go 4 or 5 innings. Like you do got to be cautious with him, and you gotta be calculated about how you kind of divide his innings out, because you want to have him for the whole year.
See, it's not just your killer photographer's eye. It's not your ability to write. It's your good cop to my bad cop presence that makes Camelback Confidential and these podcasts so delightful, because as I get down and rile up the fan base or make everybody switch it off because, oh my God, he's ranting about some idiotic again, I don't want to think about what's next. We're going to talk about DUIs. You come in and say, hey man, listen, there's going to be cuts. There could be stuff. I mean, we just got Billy Hamilton. He fell into our laps. Maybe even a more legitimate major leaguer will still fall into our laps, and that absolutely is out there. And who knows? There's still possibility, even though it seems like people just giving up like trades or anything ever anymore. I mean, there's still trades. Clearly, the White Sox would like to be able to turn some of that AAA, AA, some of that potential maybe into major league roster pieces. Whether anybody's going to go along with that, there seem to be like 800 teams rebuilding. So, I mean, you'd think there might be an opportunity for that, but the bell might have already rung there. All right, let's shift over into the bullpen, because clearly we see somehow randomly I've outlined this podcast to end on a really strong note, because listen, a clear strength that only got stronger this team, where the White Sox struck in the offseason again, probably prodded and poked by Tony La Russa saying, I gotta have my Eckersley. And so indeed Liam Hendriks came in, and he's looked fine. I don't think there's been any great concern in the bullpen. There's some guys who maybe haven't pitched as much as you'd expect, but then there's other guys like Cody Hoyer like doing 2 inning saves. So clearly it seems to be cranking. And obviously the bullpen news we got late last week, or I guess as recently, Friday, was Jimmy Cordero having to take Tommy John surgery. A guy who was on the bubble at best. I think when you break it down for a 13-man staff, it really was going to be him or Reynaldo Lopez. It was not going to be both. And there was probably a path where neither, we're somehow going to make that cut if a young arm had done well enough. So this is a guy who we weren't necessarily counting on, which is odd to say given how frequently he was used in 2020 by Ricky Renteria, a full half of the games in the short season, even though he pitched, I believe it only turned out to be 26 and change in terms of official innings. That's a lot of wear and tear with the warm-up and the readiness. And listen, he's a guy who said, he pulls up the sleeve and says, I'm ready, I'll go every game. But, it didn't work out for him effectively on the stats, even though he had terrible luck, it seems, because his FIP was pretty good last year. But he's a guy who certainly would have been maybe an immediate first call up as needed, as it always is needed with bullpen arms or even rotation arms, if there's a trickle down effect where Reynaldo ends up in the rotation. So not a great thing. And Jimmy Cordero, by all stretch of imagination, is a pretty darn good guy and a stand-up guy. So it's a real setback to have him out and missing what could be a very exciting season here with the White Sox.
Yeah, it is really unfortunate. And like you were saying, he was overused last year. It seemed like, practically every single game he was being thrown in there, or at least warming up to get ready to go in. And he was kind of one of those guys that, surprised us a little bit there. 2 years ago, he was awesome. I mean, last year he had his moments, but at the same time too, like he was just used all the time. I'd imagine he had to be, just kind of like fried, and his arm had to be hurting. Which is unfortunate now that he has to have Tommy John surgery. But, you never really want to make light of an injury. But I guess in the White Sox perspective, he probably wasn't going to make the team anyways. So it's not like they're losing one of their core guys. So I guess that's, kind of like the bright side in it. But, you got to hope for a speedy recovery for Jimmy Biceps, and hopefully he comes back and is still throwing pretty hard, because that's one of the things that, made him a factor there for a little while. But yeah, just kind of unfortunate. And like you were saying, another guy that would have been ready to go if they needed him. He would, he's got the experience, and he's a good guy, been around the team for a little bit. So kind of sucks to lose a guy like that too at the same time.
Yeah, it speaks to how cruel baseball can be too. I mean, this is a guy who bounced around a little, found a real home with the White Sox in 2019, had every reason to believe he'd be in the mix, at least if you were to extend it to the 30 most important players on the team and in the system, he'd be on there. And now he's a guy who's barely even into his arbitration process that, could potentially not have a career, after this, and certainly will have to rehabilitate, perhaps change how he pitches, certainly change how he agrees to be used going forward. And, so many guys, so many more guys don't really make it than do. And it's a reminder that, particularly with arms, my God, the way they're being thrown and used and the way you have to go out there and attack every pitch, man, the margin of error. I mean, you got weird miracles of guys who can pitch, the Randy Johnsons who can pitch into their 40s and seemingly never have trouble, but those people are so rare. We talk about the Rodons and stuff, but Jimmy Cordero is a situation now where the rest of his career is in jeopardy. I mean, he's got to play in the majors. He's got that glory. He's been a great member of the White Sox bullpen, and now a lot of that's in question. And it's fleeting, man. See, look, I even took the strong bullpen segment and made it melancholic. Wow, it's spring, Brett. It's spring.
You're having a day today.
It's not 85 degrees here and sunny. Well, yeah, so we will circle back and we will talk again after the next photo assignment, which will be next weekend. And we'll have a third episode of this, as the roster is probably pretty close to shaped up by that time. We'll see what other injury or performance issues might trigger some changes. But, as we discussed here, there's not a lot that's gray area right now. So it'll be interesting to see what else, pushes through to know. Maybe we'll get a little tell this week about whether maybe it's a Mendick versus a Hamilton situation, if that's a last member of the bench, or maybe somehow there is room for both. But, I guess there's still some stuff to play out. But I guess next time we talk, it'll be more like pointing toward Anaheim in the beginning of the season. And I guess how much better we feel with a string of 7 solid game performances between now and then. And we'll just be smiling and giggling and happy. And what we'll be doing next time, Sean, I think we'll just do an over under for like 95 wins or not. We'll be so enthused with how things are going.
And for your sake, I hope they go out and they sign about like 6 starting pitchers by the next time we record, and a couple right fielders, and they don't even know what, they're flooded with depth and they don't even know what to do with it.
Clearly, I've got to have a little pep talk for myself before we do this again, because I am too much of a black cloud here on Southside Sox Podcast 29. Apologies to all listeners and readers for that. But hey, we're just talking about real issues, and I know some of you are even far to the right in the anger scale than me, and a lot of people are like, hey man, let's just see how it plays. And that's what we're all waiting for now. We're a week or so away, or 10 days away, where it's like, okay, everybody ready, even the players are like, okay, we just want the real bell to ring, and let's get rolling, because a bad spring, they could go 0-7 this next week, and it still doesn't mean that they're not going to go 7-0 on that opening road trip. So that's the stuff we're all biting our nails for now. And I'll throw myself on the list as well, apparently taking a very negative play on it. But hey, that's why you're here, Sean, to talk me off the ledge and say, hey, come on, the season hasn't even started. We got an April Fool's opening day, man. There's gonna be a lot of laughs on a day like that. So we'll circle back about a week or so. I don't know if that's podcast 30, 31, 32, how many we'll squeeze in before then, but we will definitely be talking again in a week as you shoot your final game. We're going to start rolling out some of the Sean Williams photographs from his Camelback times. Apparently this last batch will be a lot sunnier, so all the happy ones and all the bright and tasty sharp ones are going to be from this Cleveland game, but you still got another beautiful Arizona day out there in the future for you to shoot. So we're going to be using those and rolling out all of those out all week. Make sure to shoot Nick Williams when you can. We need those.
I have you. Let me just say, I have you covered. I got about probably 10 to 12 pictures of him. So
sweet. So when Nick blossoms as an unknown comeback player of the year, most improved player candidate, we got you covered. We got Sean Williams. We got a guy down there, man. All right, well, let's do this again in a week. I promise I will be much sunnier. Or if there's cause, maybe I'll be talking you off the ledge. Who knows,
yeah,
Sean?
you never know.
I mean, we could reverse roles. I've been good cop and bad cop. I have. So
yeah. You never know. It might be me next time. And everything's kind of gone for the most part pretty good this spring so far, I'd say. But this last week is just kind of, a couple bad news, couple injuries popped up. So it's just all these things are starting to come to light now. So, as much as we were joking around about it, it's real issues and it's definitely, something worth talking about. So
we're just going to be melting into a puddle of giggles in a week, Sean. Things are going to be so good. So it's going to be an incoherent podcast because it's going to just be so happy. So I'm looking forward to that. Thanks everybody for watching, for listening, for reading, and we'll be back with Sean Williams in another week. Thanks, Sean.